The gunshot cracked across the quiet county road just as the red pickup skidded sideways into the ditch, gravel spraying against the dark pines. The truck's engine kept screaming, wheels spinning uselessly in mud, headlights slicing through a foggy Georgia night, while Daniel Mercer sat frozen behind the steering wheel, his hands trembling so hard he couldn't release the grip. For a few seconds he could not even breathe. Then, the silence came back, too quiet, the kind that presses against your ears. Daniel blinked slowly, staring through the windshield at the figure lying 20 feet ahead of the truck. A body, not moving, a boy, maybe 17, wearing a faded high school football hoodie. Daniel swallowed hard, a sour taste rising in his throat. The gun was still in his right hand. He had no memory of pulling the trigger. Somewhere in the woods, a dog barked once and then stopped. The truck engine sputtered and died. Daniel whispered hoarsely, "Jesus, Jesus Christ." But the words sounded foreign, like someone else speaking through him. The boy on the road twitched slightly. That small movement snapped something inside Daniel's mind. He shoved the door open and stumbled into the cold air. Gravel crunched under his boots as he approached the body. The kid's face was pale under the headlights. Freckles scattered across his nose, eyes wide with shock. Blood soaked through the front of the hoodie. The boy tried to speak. Only a weak breath came out. Daniel dropped to his knees beside him. Hey, stay with me, kid." His voice shook uncontrollably. The boy's lips moved again. "Why?" That was all. One word. Daniel felt something collapse inside his chest. Because the kid wasn't supposed to be here. None of this was supposed to happen tonight. The entire thing had been planned carefully, quietly, clean, but plans don't survive panic. And Daniel Mercer had panicked. He pressed his shaking hands against the wound, but blood seeped between his fingers. "Stay with me," he said again, though he could already feel life draining away. The boy stared up at him as if trying to understand who this stranger was. Then, the light in his eyes dimmed. Daniel sat there in the cold mud for a long moment after the body went still. The forest seemed to close in around him. His ears rang. His mind began racing through the chain of decisions that had led to this moment, each one suddenly looking different now that it had blood attached to it. A branch snapped somewhere deeper in the woods. Daniel looked up sharply. Headlights appeared around the bend in the road. Another car approaching. Panic surged through his chest again. He grabbed the gun and staggered to his feet. The car slowed when its headlights caught the truck in the ditch. For one impossible second, Daniel considered running into the trees, but his legs wouldn't move. The car rolled closer. It was an old sheriff's cruiser. The door opened, and Sheriff Robert Keene stepped out, his broad frame illuminated by the headlights. Keene had known Daniel for 20 years. They'd coached Little League together, drank beers after high school football games. Their daughters had grown up playing soccer on the same fields. Keene's voice carried across the road. "Daniel?" The sheriff looked confused. Then his gaze dropped to the body on the pavement. Everything in his expression changed. His hand moved slowly toward his holster. "What the hell happened here?" Daniel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The sheriff walked closer, boots crunching over gravel. The beam of his flashlight flicked across the bloodstain, spreading beneath the boy. Keene knelt down briefly, checking for a pulse he already knew he wouldn't find. When he stood again, his face looked older somehow. "You want to tell me why Tyler Bennett is lying dead in the middle of County Road 6? Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. Tyler Bennett. Of course, the Bennett kid, quarterback for the high school. Smart, well-liked, college recruiters already sniffing around. Daniel felt a wave of nausea. He had coached this boy 2 years ago. The sheriff's voice hardened. "Daniel." The gun suddenly felt heavier in Daniel's hand. Keene noticed it immediately. The sheriff's stance shifted, calm but ready. "Easy now," he said quietly. "Let's think about this." Daniel stared down at the weapon like it had appeared there on its own. Slowly, he lowered it. The sheriff took a careful step forward and gently took the gun from him. Neither man spoke for several seconds. The cold air carried the smell of pine and gasoline. Finally, Keene said, "You're going to need to explain this." Daniel opened his mouth again, but the truth tangled in his throat. Because if he started explaining tonight, it wouldn't stop with this shooting. It would unravel everything. The land deal, the threats, the money, the people who had pushed him toward decisions he could no longer undo. The sheriff watched him carefully. "Daniel," he said again, quieter now, almost pleading. "What happened?" Daniel closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, he made the first of many terrible choices. "He jumped in front of the truck," Daniel said. The lie sounded thin even to his own ears. Keene studied him in silence. The sheriff had spent 30 years reading faces. Finally, he said, "That's not blood from a truck accident." Daniel's chest tightened. Keene glanced down at the gun. then back at Daniel. "You shot him." The words hung between them. Daniel looked away. A second cruiser appeared around the bend, lights flashing now. The sheriff exhaled slowly. "All right," Keene said. "We're going to handle this step by step." But something in his voice suggested he already knew the situation would not stay simple, because small towns remember everything. And when a boy like Tyler Bennett ends up dead on a lonely road, the story never stays contained to a single night. It spreads through families, through businesses, through secrets buried years earlier. Daniel Mercer felt the weight of that future settling over him as the distant sirens grew louder. In the hours ahead, people would start asking questions, the kind of questions that peel open old wounds. And once those questions began, Daniel understood with cold certainty that tonight was only the beginning of the damage. He looked down at Tyler Bennett one last time before the other deputies arrived. The kid's face looked strangely peaceful now, like someone sleeping after a long day. Daniel wondered if anyone in town would ever believe the truth, even if he told it. Because the truth wasn't clean. The truth had roots. And those roots ran deep into the soil of Mercer County. Sheriff Keene placed a steady hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Turn around," he said quietly. Daniel did. Cold metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. In the distance, the lights of the second cruiser washed the trees in red and blue, and the long night finally began. Somewhere far away, in a quiet farmhouse at the edge of town, Daniel's daughter, Emma Mercer, woke suddenly from sleep without knowing why. She sat up in the dark, listening to the wind against the windows. A strange feeling settled in her chest, like the world had shifted slightly off its axis. She had no idea that within the next 24 hours her life, her family, and the entire town of Mercer County would be pulled into a storm of secrets that had been building for years. Because Tyler Bennett's death was not the first domino, it was simply the one that fell loud enough for everyone to hear. And by the time the truth surfaced, nothing about Mercer County would ever look the same again. By dawn, Mercer County was already talking. The first rumor started at the gas station off Route 18, where Deputy Collins had stopped for stale coffee on his way back from the scene and said too much with his face before he said anything with his mouth. By 6:30, half the town knew Tyler Bennett was dead. By 7, they knew Daniel Mercer had been there. By 8, nobody agreed on anything except that something rotten had finally split open. Emma Mercer heard the first version from her phone before she got it from a person. She was standing barefoot in her kitchen, pouring cereal she wasn't hungry for, when the group text from her cousin Becca lit up. "OMG, Emma, call me right now." Emma stared at the screen, then at the local news alert that hit a second later. "One dead in overnight shooting, local man in custody." She read it 3 times before her body reacted. The spoon slipped from her hand and clattered against the counter. Her mother, Carla, walked in wearing an old church t-shirt and sweatpants, still half asleep. "What's wrong?" Emma turned the phone around with a hand that had already started shaking. Carla took one look at the alert and went completely still. Not dramatic stillness. Worse, the kind that empties a person out. "No," she said, barely above a whisper. Emma said, "Mom." Carla grabbed the edge of the counter like the room had tilted beneath her. "No." Then her eyes snapped up, sharp and desperate. "Call your Uncle Ray. Now." Emma did. But Ray Mercer already knew. He answered on the second ring with the clipped voice of a man putting himself together too fast. "I'm on my way over." "Is it true?" Emma asked. Her own voice sounded younger than she wanted. Ray paused just long enough to tell her yes without saying yes. "Don't let your mother drive anywhere. I'll be there in 10. He hung up. Carla was already moving, not toward her purse or her shoes, but toward the hallway, as if she had forgotten what came next in ordinary life. "Mom, wait." Emma followed her into the bedroom. "Mom." Carla opened a dresser drawer, closed it, opened another one, then stood staring into socks and folded sweatshirts like they were written in another language. Emma stepped forward and caught her by the wrists. "Look at me," Carla did, finally. Her face had gone pale in that frightening, bloodless way. "What happened?" Emma asked. Carla blinked. "I don't know. It came out flat," but Emma knew her mother well enough to hear what sat underneath it. Not confusion. Fear. Fear shaped like recognition. "You know something," Emma said. Carla pulled her hands free. "I know your father was supposed to be at a zoning meeting last night." "At midnight? I don't know." "Mom." Carla turned away. "I don't know anything that helps right now." That answer lodged in Emma like a splinter. Her parents had fought for months in the careful, quiet way that married people in small towns do when they still have to see each other at the grocery store, at church, at football games. Doors had closed more often. Bills got hidden under other papers. Emma had heard her father on the phone late at night using a voice he never used at home. low and tense and respectful in a way that meant trouble. Twice she'd heard the name of Mason Holt, and anybody in Mercer County knew that name. Mason Holt owned Holt Development, Holt Aggregates, 3 rental properties, 2 car washes, and half the county commission if people were honest. He smiled like a pastor and negotiated like a knife. Ray Mercer arrived in jeans and a work jacket smelling like sawdust and diesel because he'd come straight from one of his framing crews. He was Daniel's younger brother by 4 years, shorter, broader, quicker to anger, and for most of Emma's childhood, he had been the fun uncle who showed up with fireworks, candy, and bad ideas. Today he looked sick. "Where is he?" Carla asked before Ray was fully inside. "County lockup for now. I want to see him." "You can't yet." Carla's face tightened. "I'm his wife. And that doesn't change procedure." Ray lowered his voice. Keen's trying to keep this from turning into a circus before they've even processed him. Emma heard the sheriff's name and stepped closer. "What actually happened?" Ray rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Tyler Bennett is dead. Daniel was found at the scene. That's what happened." "That's not an explanation," Emma said. Ray looked at her, and in that look she saw the argument he was having with himself, whether to protect her or use her. "Your father got mixed up in something over at Bennett Ridge." Carla shut her eyes. There it was again. Not shock, recognition. Ray noticed it too. "You knew?" he asked. "Not knew," Carla snapped. "I suspected." "Suspected what?" Emma said. Carla said nothing. Ray let out a bitter breath. Bennett Ridge was supposed to be that new subdivision Holt wanted pushed through on old farmland. Daniel got pulled in on the grading contracts and access roads. Good money, if it went through. Emma frowned. "So this is about a land deal?" "It's never just about the land," Ray said. "It's about who signs off on water rights, which parcels get condemned, whose cousin gets the hauling contract, who leans on who. Holt wants that ridge because once the interstate bypass comes in, those 40 acres become gold." Carla folded her arms tightly over her chest. "Daniel said he was just doing preliminary work." Ray laughed once, without humor. "Daniel always says he's just doing one thing when he's already standing knee-deep in something worse." Emma felt anger spike through the numbness. "You all keep talking around it. Why would Dad be with Tyler Bennett?" This time, nobody answered immediately. The silence itself told her the question mattered. Finally, Carla said, "Because Tyler's father wouldn't sell." Emma stared. "Mr. Bennett? He was holding out," Ray said. "Frank Bennett inherited most of that land from his daddy, and Tyler was the one helping him handle paperwork, survey maps, all that. Smart kid. Smarter than people gave him credit for. A few weeks ago, Frank told me Tyler found something in the county records that didn't add up." "What thing?" Emma asked. Ray glanced toward Carla, then back at Emma. "Parcel lines, easements, some signatures that looked off. It sounded like somebody had been trying to redraw access in a way that boxed Bennett in," Carla whispered. "Oh God." Emma's pulse started climbing again. "Are you saying Dad was trying to steal their land?" Ray's expression hardened. "I'm saying your father may have signed onto something he didn't fully understand until it was too late. That sounds like an excuse." "It sounds like Daniel," Ray shot back. "He thinks one bad compromise can be managed if it keeps the lights on. Then another one shows up. Then another. Next thing, he's standing in blood, swearing he never meant for any of it to happen." Carla sank down into a kitchen chair, as though her knees had given out all at once. Emma had never seen her mother look small before. Even in hard years, Carla Mercer had carried herself like a woman who believed structure could be imposed on chaos through enough casseroles, payroll envelopes, and Sunday service. Now she looked like somebody whose private math had stopped working. "He borrowed against the house," Carla said quietly. Ray stared at her. "What?" She kept her eyes on the floor. 3 months ago, I found the notice. He told me it was temporary. A bridge loan for equipment because the commercial account was tied up." Ray said a curse under his breath. Emma felt like the air had thickened around her. "He put the house up?" Carla nodded once. "Without telling me first." Ray paced 2 steps, then 2 back. "That would explain Holt." Emma looked at him. "Explain what?" "Why Daniel wouldn't back out once he realized it was dirty. He stopped moving. Holt owns people through debt. Not with thugs. Not most of the time. He does it with notes, side loans, favors that become leverage." Carla lifted her head. "Then we go to the sheriff. We tell him everything." Ray's face closed off. "If we had everything, maybe." "What does that mean?" Emma asked. Ray hesitated. "It means I don't know what Daniel actually did." The house fell silent again. Outside, a trash truck groaned down the street. Somewhere a dog barked. The ordinary sounds made Emma want to scream. She grabbed her keys from the counter. Carla looked up. Where are you going? To find out what happened. No. Mom, they're already saying his name on Facebook. People are posting Tyler's senior pictures. I'm not sitting here while the whole town decides who my father is. Emma, you want me to wait until some reporter's camera is on our lawn? Ray stepped in front of the door. You're not going to the jail. Move. Not the jail. Then where? Emma thought of the only place that made sense. The Bennett place. Carla stood so fast the chair legs scraped. Absolutely not. Tyler is dead, Mom. If my father had anything to do with it, they deserve to hear something from us before the lawyers and deputies and gossip all turn it into poison. Ray shook his head. They do not want to see a Mercer on that porch this morning. Maybe not. Emma met his eyes. But maybe Tyler knew something. Maybe his room, his truck, his friends, any of it, points to why he was on that road with my father in the middle of the night. Ray studied her. Carla said, You are not turning this into some investigation. Emma said, Somebody should. Then she pushed past her uncle and left before either of them could stop her. The Bennett farm sat 7 miles outside town, where the highway gave way to 2-lane roads edged with winter fields and rusted fence lines. Emma had been there once for a church fundraiser years ago. She remembered hay bales, a grill smoking in the yard, Tyler as a lanky middle school kid racing somebody on an ATV. This morning, the place looked transformed by grief and public spectacle. 3 news vans were parked along the shoulder. A state police car blocked half the driveway. Neighbors stood in clusters under coats and baseball caps, speaking in hushed tones loud enough to travel. Emma parked down the road and walked the rest of the way. The wind cut through her sweatshirt. She kept her head down until somebody recognized her anyway. That's Mercer's girl. It came from a woman she knew by face but not by name. Another voice muttered, Shameful. Emma kept walking. She had almost reached the porch when Frank Bennett came out. He was a large man, gone soft around the middle with age. But there was nothing soft in his face now. He looked like he hadn't slept, and like sleep would not have helped. His wife, Linda, stood just behind him, her hand clamped over her own mouth. Emma stopped at the bottom step. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Frank said, You need to leave. Emma's throat tightened. Mr. Bennett, I know this is. You don't know a damn thing about this. I came because you think this is your turn to feel difficult? The words hit hard because of how controlled they were. Not shouted, not wild. Frank Bennett had gone past that place already. My son is in the ground in my mind, and your father is breathing in a heated room with deputies bringing him coffee. Emma swallowed. I'm sorry. Don't. He took 1 step down from the porch. Don't you say that word to me like it balances anything. Linda Bennett spoke without lowering her hand. Frank. He ignored her. Emma's instinct said run, but she made herself stay. Did Tyler say anything recently about my dad? Frank let out a stunned laugh. That's why you're here? I'm trying to understand why. Your father came here 2 nights ago. Emma blinked. What? Linda shut her eyes. Frank's jaw worked. He drove up after dark and asked Tyler to come talk privately by the barn. I didn't like it, so I stayed out by the truck. They argued. Not yelling. Worse than yelling. Tyler came back white as a sheet. Emma felt her heartbeat in her throat. What did they argue about? Frank stared at her for a long moment, then said, Your father wanted papers. What papers? Maps. Survey copies. My son had gone down to the courthouse records office and pulled historical easements. He found one document that didn't match the digital filing. Dates were wrong. Signature looked like it had been lifted. Tyler took pictures of it because he didn't trust the clerk not to lose it. Emma's mind started moving too fast. Did he still have the pictures? Frank's expression turned ugly. That's the first smart question anybody from your family has asked. Linda stepped forward then, exhausted and furious in a quieter way than her husband. Tyler's phone is gone. Emma stared at her. Gone? Linda nodded. He had it when he left for practice yesterday. It was not on him when they brought his things home, Frank said. You tell me what that means. Emma's chest went cold. I don't know. Then get off my property. Linda's eyes were red, but there was something searching in them too. Frank. He turned on her. No. Let her ask one thing. He looked like he might refuse, then didn't. Emma said, very carefully, Did Tyler go somewhere after practice? Linda answered. He got a text. He was eating chili at the counter and his phone buzzed. He read it, stood there a second, then told me he had to go meet somebody, because if he didn't, it would get worse. Frank snapped. Why didn't you tell the sheriff that? I did. Linda looked at Emma, not her husband. He wouldn't say who. I asked if it was a girl. He said no. I asked if it was about the land. He looked at me. She swallowed hard. That was answer enough, Emma said. Did you see the text? Linda shook her head, but he put on that old gray hoodie and left in a hurry. The same hoodie Tyler had been wearing on the road. Emma took a breath that shuddered on the way in. Mrs. Bennett, if my father took his phone. Frank lunged one step, and Emma flinched before she could stop herself. If? He said. If? A deputy appeared from the side yard then and moved closer, clearly ready to intervene. Emma backed off the step. I'm sorry, she said again, because there was nothing else left. This time, Frank just turned his back on her. Linda held his arm as they went inside. The screen door slapped shut behind them. Emma stood there, one more second in the wind, feeling every pair of eyes from the yard on her, then turned and walked fast toward her car. She did not cry until she reached it. Even then, it came as anger first. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Her father had gone to that house. Her father had asked Tyler for papers. Tyler's phone was missing. There were too many pieces suddenly pointing in one direction, and Emma hated herself for seeing the shape they made. She sat there breathing hard until somebody knocked softly on her passenger window. She looked up, wiping at her face. It was Jonah Ruiz, Tyler's friend. Not best friend, maybe, but close. Emma knew him from school board meetings and summer jobs at the marina. He was 19, lean, dark-haired, always carrying a kind of watchful stillness that made adults underestimate him. He glanced back toward the farmhouse before speaking. You shouldn't be here. Emma rolled the window halfway down. I figured that out. Jonah shoved his hands deeper into his jacket pockets. Tyler told me something Tuesday night. Emma straightened. What? He looked over his shoulder again. Not here. She studied him. Then where? Dawson's Diner. 10 minutes. Why not now? Because there's a trooper by the shed staring at me like I've got answers. His mouth tightened. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't want to hand them over before I know who's dirty. Emma felt a spike of fear mixed with reluctant hope. You think the sheriff's office is involved? Jonah shrugged once. I think this county has too many cousins. Then he stepped back from the car and walked away before she could ask anything else. Dawson's Diner sat just off the old highway, half chrome and half patched siding, with a cracked neon coffee cup in the front window that only lit properly after dark. By the time Emma got there, the breakfast crowd had thickened into the usual late-morning mix of retirees, contractors, and people who claimed to be between jobs. She spotted Jonah in the back booth under the faded Coca-Cola sign. He had ordered coffee and not touched it. Emma slid in across from him. The waitress, Doris, came over with a pot and gave Emma a long look that mixed pity and gossip. You need anything, honey? Coffee's fine. Doris poured and moved on. Jonah waited until she was out of earshot. Tyler thought someone was watching him. Emma wrapped both hands around the mug, even though it was too hot. Since when? A week, maybe. He said a black SUV kept showing up near the records office, the field by the ridge, his practice lot. He joked about it at first. Jonah's expression darkened, then he stopped joking. Emma said, Did he say who he thought it was? Not exactly. He said your dad was acting weird. The words landed between them and stayed there. Emma looked down into the coffee. Weird how? Tyler ran into him at the courthouse annex last Friday. Said your dad looked like he hadn't slept and kept asking whether Tyler had copied everything. Emma's stomach tightened. Everything? What? Tyler didn't tell me all of it. That was kind of his problem. He liked holding the big reveal. Jonah finally picked up his coffee, then set it down again without drinking. But he did show me one thing. What? Jonah leaned forward. An old plat map, paper copy, marked up with new access roads in red ink. There was a note at the bottom with initials, DM. Emma stared at him. My father's initials? Probably. Or somebody making it look like his initials. Jonah gave her a flat look. Maybe. She hated that maybe. Where's the map? He kept it in his truck toolbox. Did the deputies search it? This morning? Yeah, but Tyler moved stuff around when he got nervous. He had a place out by the bait freezer at the marina where he stashed things he didn't want his dad asking about. Emma frowned. Why would he stash legal records at the marina? Because nobody thinks to look in a place that smells like worms and fish guts. For the first time since dawn, something almost like a plan formed. Take me there. Jonah studied her face, searching for weakness maybe, or an angle. Why? Because if the phone's gone and the paper's hidden, then somebody besides the sheriff needs to see it before it disappears too. He leaned back slightly. You trust me that much? Emma gave a tired, humorless breath. No, but I trust that Tyler told you more than you've said. Jonah looked out the window. 2 county utility trucks rolled past, mud on the doors. He said if anything happened to him, it wouldn't just be because of the land. Emma's pulse kicked. Then what? He thought somebody was using the development to cover dumping. Emma blinked. Dumping what? Jonah lowered his voice. Construction waste at best, maybe contaminated fill, maybe something from that old textile mill site over in Carver. He said the access roads were being shifted to keep inspectors away from a drainage cut that fed into Mill Creek. Emma sat very still. Mill Creek ran behind 3 neighborhoods and the elementary school playground before it emptied into the river. That can't be right. That's what I said. Jonah's jaw tightened. Tyler said he'd seen trucks after midnight on land that wasn't supposed to be open yet. No permits posted. No lights except covered work lamps. He got video from the tree line one night, but he wouldn't send it to me. Said if he spread it around too soon, whoever was involved would know exactly what he had. Emma pictured Tyler on that dark road, hoodie zipped against the cold, carrying secrets bigger than he could manage alone. So he met somebody last night because of this? Probably. My father? Jonah looked at her for a long second, maybe at first. Doris came back with a plate for another table, giving them the kind of casual side glance that meant she would repeat anything interesting by noon. Jonah waited until she was gone again. There's more. Emma's chest tightened. Say it. He ran a hand through his hair. Tyler thought Sheriff Keene knew pieces of it. Emma felt the booth seem smaller around her. Keene? Not that he was running it. Tyler didn't know. But he said Keene kept telling his dad to settle the easement dispute quietly. Said a fight with Holt would drag the county into lawsuits it couldn't afford. Emma remembered Sheriff Keene cuffing her father on the road, his face lined with something more complicated than simple duty. That's not proof he's dirty. No, Jonah said. It's proof people with power were trying to keep this small. He slid something across the table then. A key. Small, brass, on a floating cork fob from the marina. Bait freezer padlock. Tyler gave it to me last month as a joke in case he died of food poisoning from the chowder. Emma picked it up slowly. You should give this to the police. Maybe. His eyes stayed on hers. But if your dad really killed him over that phone, then the police already had a head start. Emma closed her fingers around the key. Outside, a train horn sounded somewhere far beyond the diner. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. The hush between them was not peace. It was calculation, grief, and the first hard shape of betrayal settling into place. Emma thought of her father in a cell, of her mother sitting at the kitchen table with borrowed lies collapsing around her, of Tyler Bennett on the road asking one last broken question. Why? She did not know yet whether that question belonged to her father, to Holt, to the sheriff, or to the county itself. She only knew that by lunchtime she would be standing at the marina opening a freezer somebody had gone to great trouble to keep hidden, and whatever she found there would make it harder, not easier, to survive what came next. The marina sat on the edge of Mercer Lake where the town tried to pretend it was something prettier than it really was, with weathered docks, dented rental boats, a bait shack leaning slightly toward the water, and a sour smell of gasoline, fish scales, and standing algae that never fully left your clothes. Emma parked behind Jonah's truck and stared out through the windshield for a moment before moving. Noon light lay flat over the lake, making everything look exposed. Jonah killed his engine and said, "Manager's out on deliveries till 2. We should have 20 minutes, maybe 30. Emma closed her fingers around the cork float key in her pocket. You sound like you've done this before. Tyler used this place like a second closet. He got out and walked toward the bait shack without checking whether she followed. She did. The boardwalk thudded under their feet. Somewhere nearby, an outboard motor coughed to life and faded again. Jonah led her around the side of the shack to a cinderblock storage lean-to with a chest freezer pushed against the wall under a stained tarp. He stopped, listening. The lake slapped softly against the pilings. You got gloves? He asked. Emma shook her head. Jonah pulled a pair of cheap work gloves from his back pocket and handed her one. One's all I've got. I'll use my sleeve. How reassuring. He gave a brief, humorless smile. You want reassuring? You're at the wrong address. Emma knelt by the padlock, hands suddenly less steady than she wanted them to be. It took her 2 tries to get the key in. The lock clicked open with a sound much louder than it should have been. Jonah lifted the lid. Cold air mixed with the stink of old bait and freezer burn. At first, all Emma saw were stacked wax boxes of minnows, plastic tubs, and a torn feed sack. Jonah began moving things aside quickly. Come on, Tyler, he muttered, like annoyance was easier than fear. Then his hand stopped. Under the feed sack sat a gallon zip bag, fogged with frost. Inside were folded papers and what looked like a flash drive wrapped in a red shop rag. Emma's pulse kicked hard. Jonah lifted the bag carefully and set it on the overturned bucket beside them. Emma crouched closer. That's it? Looks like it. He peeled the bag open. The papers were damp around the edges but readable. Survey copies, parcel maps, a photocopy of an old easement deed with handwritten notes. Emma spotted the red ink road lines Jonah had mentioned. And at the bottom of one page, a set of initials, D, M. Her stomach dropped. That could be anybody, she said automatically, and hated how weak it sounded. Jonah didn't argue. He unfolded another sheet. This one was a printout of emails. Tyler must have printed them from somewhere else. Emma scanned the visible lines and saw one sender name immediately, R. Keene. Another, M. Holt. The subject line read, RE. Access variance. She reached for the page, but Jonah pulled it back. Wait. Give it to me. We need to know what we're holding before we wave it around. He flipped through faster, eyes narrowing. Some of this is county stuff. Some is private contract stuff. He stopped on a page with highlighted text. Jesus. What? He turned it so she could see. The highlighted line read, if Mercer balks, remind him what's tied to the house, and route the fill through the west cut before Bennett gets another look. Emma read it twice before it became real. That's Holt? Looks like it. And my father was copied? Jonah nodded once. Emma felt the air leave her body in a slow, sickening pull. Daniel Mercer had known. Or had known enough to stay in it. Her father's face rose in her mind, not from the shooting scene or the news alert, but from a Saturday in 5th grade, when he had sat cross-legged on the living room floor, helping her glue together a solar system model, because she had cried over a broken styrofoam Saturn. He had been patient then. Solid. The kind of dad other kids borrowed for science fairs and flat tires. Emma realized with sharp bitterness how little that memory could do for her now. Jonah dug deeper into the bag. There's something else. He pulled out Tyler's phone, sealed in another sandwich bag with a strip of blue painter's tape around it. Emma stared. He hid his own phone? Looks like a backup stash. Maybe he swapped it last night. Jonah turned it over. Screen's cracked. Can you unlock it? No clue. Emma looked back at the papers. If Tyler hid this here, then whatever he brought to the road wasn't everything. Maybe just enough to bargain with. Jonah slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. Emma snapped. That's not yours. He looked up sharply. And it's not yours either. It belongs to his family. His family will hand it to the sheriff. Maybe they should. Jonah stood. You still think procedure is going to save anybody? Emma rose too, the glove slick with freezer condensation. I think stealing evidence makes us look guilty. Us? His expression hardened. That's generous. The words hit. Emma swallowed her anger because a worse sound cut through it. Tires on gravel. A vehicle pulling up behind the shack. Jonah heard it too. His head turned toward the lot. A car door slammed, then a voice. Anybody around back? Female. Familiar. Emma peered around the corner and saw Deputy Lena Collins rounding the bait shack with one hand resting near her belt. Not on the gun, but close enough to remind everyone it was there. She was younger than most deputies. Early 30s maybe. Local girl who'd gone to community college and come back in uniform. Emma knew her by sight from fundraisers and traffic stops. Lena froze when she saw them. Her gaze dropped immediately to the open freezer, then the papers, then Emma. Well, she said, this is already a bad idea. Jonah moved subtly. Enough that Emma noticed, but maybe Lena didn't. Putting himself between the deputy and the bucket. We're just looking for Tyler's things. Lena's eyes stayed on him. And why would you do that instead of letting us do our jobs? Emma spoke before he could. Because his phone went missing. Lena's expression changed only slightly, but Emma caught it. A flicker. Who told you that? His mother. Mrs. Bennett is grieving. So are we, Emma said, louder than she meant. Lena's eyes moved back to her. For a moment, something softer passed across the deputy's face. Then it was gone. Hand me the documents, Jonah said. Do you have a warrant for the freezer? Lena almost smiled. You think that sentence helps you? I think chain of custody matters. Funny, she said. You discover legal standards right after breaking into private storage. Emma stepped in. Deputy Collins, if there's evidence here that Tyler was being threatened, I know what Tyler Bennett is now, Lena said. I know what your father is accused of. And I know if you two start pocketing things, every lawyer between here and Atlanta gets to muddy the water. She held out her hand. Give me the papers. Emma looked at Jonah. He did not move. Lena's jaw tightened. Don't make me put cuffs on this. Jonah said quietly. Do you work for Keene or Holt? The silence that followed was so sharp, Emma felt it in her teeth. Lena's face closed completely. That's your one free stupid question, Jonah said. Answer it. Lena took one step forward. I work for the county. And right now that means protecting an investigation from two kids who think panic is a strategy. Emma heard something under the words. Not guilt. Exhaustion. Did you know about the fill? Emma asked. Lena looked at her then. Really looked. I know more than is good for me. Then help us. A long second passed. Then another vehicle pulled into the lot. All three of them turned. This time it was a black SUV. Clean, expensive, anonymous in the exact deliberate way that announced money in Mercer County. Mason Holt stepped out of the driver's side, wearing boots too new for mud and a navy quarter-zip sweater that somehow made his silver hair look more respectable than it deserved. He shut the door softly and smiled the instant he spotted Emma. There she is. Emma felt cold all over. Jonah muttered, perfect. Lena straightened visibly. Not deferential exactly. Guarded. Holt's eyes flicked over the open freezer, the deputy, Jonah, then settled back on Emma with practiced concern. Emma, I heard about your father. Terrible thing. Just terrible. She said nothing. Holt came closer, hands visible, voice warm enough for church foyers and county banquets. Your daddy is a decent man who got himself into a bad night. I've been speaking with counsel already, trying to make sure nobody jumps to conclusions. Emma said, why are you here? I might ask the same question. His smile held. But I'm assuming grief and confusion. Those are powerful engines for bad judgment. Jonah let out a low laugh. That's rich. Holt turned his head as if noticing Jonah for the first time. Ruiz, right? You know exactly who I am. Not personally. Holt's tone never changed. I know your uncle runs fuel at the North Dock. Jonah's shoulders tightened. Holt looked back to Emma. Deputy Collins was kind enough to call and mention there might be some sensitive material turning up in unsecured places. I came to spare your family further embarrassment. Emma stared at Lena. You called him? Lena said flatly. I called the property owner's office because Holt Development leases this annex. And he answered? Emma shot back. Lena did not answer. Holt sighed softly, like he regretted everyone else's lack of composure. Let's simplify. Any documents related to Bennett Ridge need to be turned over properly. If there are misunderstandings in the county filings, I want them corrected. If someone acted outside instructions, I want that corrected too. Like my father? Emma asked. Holt spread his hands. Daniel was under immense financial strain. That can push good men toward poor decisions. The sentence landed exactly as intended. An offer disguised as sympathy. A storyline. Emma heard it and understood that he was already writing the public version, and in that version Daniel Mercer would be the whole problem. Not the easiest target, the only one. Jonah said, You threatened him. Holt's gaze did not even flicker. Be careful what words you use around law enforcement, son. That email in there says otherwise. Holt's expression shifted for the first time, still calm, less patient. Then we definitely need to see what you're referring to, Lena said. Enough. Everybody stepped back. But the temperature had changed. Emma could feel it. Holt took another step closer, lowering his voice. Emma, listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you've found, now is not the time to play detective. Your mother will need help. Legal bills, mortgage pressure, public attention. These things become unbearable quickly. I can make sure your family gets through the next month. Emma almost laughed from the sheer ugliness of how plain he was willing to be. In exchange for what? In exchange for common sense. He nodded toward the bucket. Turn over what isn't yours. Stop feeding gossip. Let the system work. Emma heard her father's voice from years ago telling her that men who used the phrase common sense usually meant shut up. The memory steadied her. The system is why Tyler Bennett is dead, she said. Holt's smile vanished. It was not dramatic. It simply switched off. Lena said sharply. Mr. Holt, that's enough. He ignored her. You're upset. I understand that. But before you go repeating dangerous things, remember your father was found holding the gun. Emma said. Was he? Holt's eyes narrowed very slightly. Excuse me? You weren't there, Emma said. So how do you know what he was holding? Nobody moved. Even Jonah went still. Lena turned her head toward Holt, slow and deliberate. The lake noise seemed to vanish under the weight of that one question. Holt answered after a beat too long. Because that's what people said. Emma kept her eyes on him. Who said? Don't be cute. Who? Holt glanced at Lena, as if suddenly remembering she was present in a different way now. Then he smiled again, but the edges were wrong. This is exactly the kind of pointless heat that gets people hurt. Jonah's voice went low. Sounded like a threat that time. Lena stepped forward, placing herself squarely between Holt and the bucket. Mr. Holt, back to your vehicle. Deputy Collins. Now. Something in her tone made him obey, though not far. He took 2 steps back and folded his arms. Lena bent and gathered the papers herself, slipping them into an evidence envelope from her cruiser. She looked at Emma while she did it. The phone, too. Jonah hesitated. Lena said quietly, "Don't make me do this the hard way in front of him." Jonah handed it over. Lena sealed that separately. When she straightened, she kept her body angled away from Holt. "You two need to leave." Emma heard more beneath the words. Not just an order, a push. Get out before you're trapped in whatever comes next. Jonah seemed to hear it too. "Where are you taking those?" "Sheriff's office." "That's not good enough." Lena's eyes flashed. "No, it isn't, but it's the route I've got." Then, lower, so Holt could not hear, she added, "If you care about your father, tell your Uncle Ray to stop hiding the yellow ledger." Emma stared. What yellow ledger? But Lena was already walking toward her cruiser. Holt watched her go with a face like concrete. Then he looked at Emma one last time. "The smart thing," he said, "would be to go home and let adults manage the fallout." Emma answered without thinking. The adults buried it. Holt's jaw set. He got in his SUV and pulled out without another word. Jonah waited until both vehicles were gone before speaking. "Yellow ledger?" Emma shook her head. "I have no idea. Your uncle might." She looked toward the empty road, then back at him. "Or Lena just handed us a grenade." Jonah shoved his hands into his pockets. "Either way, we're moving now." "To Ray. You trust him?" Emma looked at the lake, flat and brown under the weak sun. "No," she said. "But he's blood." Saying it made her feel both loyal and stupid. Ray was at the construction yard on the south end of town when Emma found him, standing beside a stack of treated lumber, shouting into his phone while men in tool belts pretended not to listen. He ended the call when he saw her and Jonah getting out of the truck together. "Why is he with you?" Emma said. "We found Tyler's stash." Ray's face changed at once. He walked them into the empty office trailer and shut the door. "What stash?" Emma told him. Fast and precise. "The freezer. The papers. Holt. Lena. The phone." By the time she repeated the phrase yellow ledger, Ray had gone still in the same dangerous way her mother had that morning. "So there is one," he said quietly. Emma folded her arms. "You tell me." Ray looked at Jonah, clearly measuring whether to send him out. Jonah held his gaze and stayed put. Finally, Ray sat on the edge of the metal desk and rubbed both hands over his face. Daniel kept books separate from the business account. "Why?" Emma asked. "Because sometimes contractors get paid in ways they don't want taxed, and sometimes county work gets floated till paperwork clears." "That's not an answer." "It's the first layer." Ray dropped his hands. "A few months back I saw a yellow ledger in Daniel's truck. Old school handwritten entries. Dates, loads, site names, cash disbursements. Not normal for him. I asked about it. He said it was insurance." Jonah said, "Against Holt?" Ray looked at him. "Against everybody." Emma's chest tightened. "Where is it?" Ray stood, pacing once across the trailer. "I moved it." Emma felt something between relief and fury explode in her. "You what?" "After Daniel came to me 3 weeks ago, drunker than I'd seen him in 10 years, and said if anything happened to him, I was supposed to take care of you and your mother." Emma's anger stumbled over that. "He said that?" "Yeah." Ray's eyes reddened, though his voice stayed hard. Then he started crying, which your father never does, and told me he'd tried to back out. But Holt had him by the house note, and Keene by the permits, and there were trucks moving at night he didn't approve. Jonah said, "So why didn't you go to the cops?" Ray barked out a laugh. "Which cop?" Nobody answered. Ray pointed at Emma. "I took the ledger because Daniel left it in his glove compartment like an idiot. I figured I'd hold it until he either came clean or came to his senses." "Where is it now?" Emma asked again. Ray hesitated. That hesitation told her the truth before he did. "At my place." "Then let's go." "Not so fast." Ray looked through the trailer window toward his workers, then back at them. "If Collins knows about it, we may already be late." Emma felt the room constrict around her. "You think Holt will go there?" "I think if Holt's rattled, he'll send somebody who doesn't wear sweaters." A hard knock hit the trailer door before any of them could move. All three turned. Another knock, firmer. Ray swore under his breath and stepped toward the window. Emma moved beside him. Outside stood Sheriff Robert Keene, hat in one hand, the other resting on his hip. He looked tired enough to fall over, and steady enough not to. Parked behind him was his cruiser, dusty from county roads. No backup in sight. Keene looked up and met Emma's eyes through the glass. He did not wave. He just waited. Ray said, "Well, here comes one of our problems." Emma's pulse rose again, but differently this time. Less blind fear, more decision. They were past the point where anybody could pretend the truth would surface gently. Whatever happened next would either lock the story into Holt's shape or blow it open. She turned the trailer latch before Ray could stop her and open the door. Keen looked from her to Jonah to Ray. "I was hoping to save us all some time," he said. Then his gaze settled on Emma, and for the first time since the road last night there was nothing performative in his face at all, only weariness and something like regret. "Your father says he didn't shoot Tyler Bennett on purpose." Emma held the door wider but did not invite him in. "That's a hell of a place to start." Keen took that in without flinching. "It is." He looked past Emma into the trailer. "Can I come inside? Or are we doing this for your whole crew?" Ray said. "Depends whether you came here as a friend or to search my property." "Neither," Keen said. "I came because things are moving faster than I can control." That got nobody's trust, but it got him space. Ray stepped aside just enough for the sheriff to enter. Keen removed his hat, shut the door behind himself, and stood in the cramped trailer office with the posture of a man who had carried authority so long he no longer knew what to do when it stopped helping. Up close, the lines in his face looked deeper than they had on the road. He glanced at Jonah. "You too, huh?" Jonah folded his arms. "That a problem? Today, most things are." Keen set his hat on the metal desk and looked at Emma again. "Your father finally stopped lying by omission about an hour ago. Not completely, just enough." Emma leaned against the wall, refusing to let him see how badly she wanted the next sentence. "Enough for what?" Keen exhaled slowly. "Enough to say Tyler Bennett called him first." That hit the room differently than anything else had. Ray frowned. Jonah uncrossed his arms. Emma said, "No." "Yes." Keen held her gaze. "Tyler called Daniel around 10:40 last night from a prepaid number. We pulled tower pings off the device after Daniel gave it up." Emma felt her mind shift, forcing pieces into new places. Why would Tyler call him? According to Daniel, Tyler said he had something Daniel needed to see before Holt made a bigger mess. Tyler told him to come alone. Ray muttered. "Jesus Christ," Jonah said. "And Daniel brought a gun?" Keen's expression hardened. "Daniel says he took the gun because he'd been told not to trust anybody around the ridge after dark. He says he thought Holt might send people." Ray barked a bitter laugh. "Convenient." "It's also plausible," Keen said. "I didn't say noble." Emma heard the distinction and hated that part of her respected it. "So what happened?" she asked. Keen rubbed his thumb over the brim of his hat before answering. "Daniel says Tyler was already on the road when he got there. He says Tyler had a phone and a folder." They argued. Tyler accused him of helping cover illegal fill and forged access adjustments. Daniel admitted he'd signed revised routes, but claimed he did it under pressure and didn't know the worst of it until recently. Jonah scoffed. "Recently?" Keen shot him a look. "I'm telling you what he said, not inviting applause." Emma said. "Then the shooting." Keen's jaw tightened. "Daniel says another truck came up the service road without headlights. Tyler panicked and tried to run back toward his own truck. Daniel got out with the gun." Somebody shouted. Tyler slipped in the gravel. Daniel grabbed for him. The gun discharged. Ray said flatly, "That story stinks." "Maybe." Keen did not argue. "But the ballistics angle is complicated by powder pattern and the entry wound. It was close, not contact. Could fit a struggle." Emma's stomach rolled. Tyler falling, her father grabbing, a gun going off in confusion instead of intent. It did not absolve anything. Somehow it made it worse. "Who was in the other truck?" she asked. Keen hesitated. "Daniel says he couldn't see." Jonah laughed once, sharp and ugly. "Of course. He says he heard a voice he recognized." Keen looked at Ray then, not Emma. "Your brother says it was Wade Holt." Ray's face went blank. "Mason's nephew?" "Yeah." "Then arrest him." "On Daniel Mercer's word?" Keen snapped, the first crack in his control. "Half the county would say he's already building a fantasy to spread blame." Silence followed. Keen collected himself a moment later and lowered his voice. "I have one dead kid, one contractor in custody, a county commissioner on the phone with Atlanta Council, and now reports that evidence related to Bennett Ridge is being fished out of storage boxes and bait freezers before I can secure it. You tell me what part I arrest first," Emma said. "Start with Holt." Keen looked at her sadly. "That's not how power works here, and you know it." "Then maybe that's the problem." "It is the problem," Keen said. "It's been the problem since before you were born." He straightened. "Deputy Collins called me about the documents she recovered. Before she got back, somebody ran her off the road on County 12. Ray swore. Jonah's head came up. Emma felt cold flood through her limbs. "Is she okay? Bruised? Concussion maybe." "Car's wrecked," Documents and phone are gone. Emma shut her eyes for 1 second. Of course. Of course the evidence would not travel in a straight line, Keene said. Now, maybe you understand why I'm standing in your brother's trailer instead of processing paperwork. Ray stared at him. You think I've got something? Keene's eyes shifted to him. I think Daniel trusted you with leverage, maybe a ledger. Nobody spoke. That was answer enough. Keene nodded once, tired. Right. Ray's voice turned hard. If I had something like that, why would I give it to you when half your office might be leaking? Keene said. Because if Holt gets there first, your brother dies in prison wearing this alone. Emma watched the sheriff's face closely. She saw frustration, yes, fear too, but not the oily self-protective fear of a man trying to bury his own tracks. This felt more like a man watching a flood rise around a town he had spent too long pretending he could manage with sandbags. Did you know about the dumping? She asked. Keene met her eyes. I knew there were allegations. That's a dodge. I knew trucks were moving after hours, and that Holt had a habit of treating permit boundaries as suggestions. I did not know, until Tyler Bennett started poking around, that the fill might tie back to the Carver Mill remediation stockpiles. Jonah said. So Tyler was right. Looks that way. And you told Frank Bennett to settle quietly anyway. Keene flinched almost invisibly. I told Frank the county would bury him in process if he went to war without proof. That's not better, Emma said. No, Keene said. It isn't. Ray went to the trailer window and stared out at his workers without seeming to see them. You should have told me sooner, he muttered. Maybe to himself, maybe to his brother somewhere else. Keene said. Ray, where is it? Ray turned back slowly. Not here. Where? At my house. Keene nodded. Then we go now. Ray laughed without humor. And bring the sheriff straight to it. What could go wrong? What goes wrong is Wade Holt, or whoever he uses gets there before us. You got proof Wade was on that road? Jonah asked. No, Keene said. I've got Daniel's statement and tire impressions that don't match Tyler's truck or Daniel's pickup. Impressions that will mean less by the hour. Emma looked at Ray. We need the ledger. Ray looked at her for a long second, as if measuring whether she understood what it meant to cross from suspicion into evidence. Then he nodded once. Fine. He turned to Keene. But if you bring that thing into the office and it vanishes, I'll go to every camera in this county and say your name first, Keene said. Fair. The drive to Ray's place took 12 minutes that felt like an hour. Keene followed in his cruiser while Emma rode with Ray and Jonah in Ray's work truck. Nobody played music. The road out to Ray's house cut past dormant soybean fields and a shuttered feed store with broken windows that had been covered in plywood since fall. Emma watched the landscape slide by and kept seeing the same images over each other. Tyler's still face in the headlights. Holt's smile going dead at the edges. Her father on the living room floor with the science fair planets. Lena Collins's warning. Her mother sitting at the kitchen table, holding herself together out of habit because feelings had become a luxury. Do you think Dad's telling the truth? She asked finally. Ray kept his eyes on the road. Which truth? That he didn't mean to shoot Tyler. Ray took a long breath. I think your father has spent months telling himself half-truths so he could keep moving. Sometimes men do that so long they don't know when they crossed over into the full lie. That was not an answer, but it was honest in a way she could use. Jonah said quietly from the passenger seat. Accident doesn't help Tyler much. I know, Emma said. Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. I know. Ray's place sat behind a stand of sweet gum trees on 5 acres of scrubby land with a chain-link fence around the yard, a sagging carport, and a modest ranch house he had inherited from their grandmother. A hound barked from the back pen as they pulled in. Keene was already out of the cruiser when they parked. He scanned the tree line automatically, hand near his belt. Anybody else been here? He asked. Ray shook his head. Not unless they learned to climb gates. The front door was locked. Ray opened it and led them through a living room that smelled faintly of coffee, dog, and old cigarettes he claimed he had quit. He went straight to the hall closet, dropped to one knee, and reached behind a stack of paint cans. His hand came back empty. He froze. Emma felt the floor leave her stomach. Ray shoved the paint cans aside, then the toolbox, then the folded camping chair. No. He stood abruptly and went to the bedroom. They followed. He yanked open dresser drawers, kicked aside a laundry basket, checked under the bed. No, no, no. Keene moved to the back door. The latch plate was splintered, not obvious from outside unless you knew to look. Ray. Ray turned and saw it. For a moment, the room held absolute silence. Then Jonah said, Somebody beat us. Ray slammed his fist into the wall hard enough to rattle a framed deer photo. Damn it. Emma felt panic rising too fast to think through. Who knew? Keen's voice sharpened. Who knew where you kept it? Nobody. Think harder. Ray swore and paced. Maybe Daniel guessed I'd stash it here. Maybe Holt had him watched. Maybe Collins already told somebody enough to put them on alert. Keen checked the back step, then the yard. Not a professional entry. Quick hit. Door forced. House searched messy. No electronics touched. They wanted one thing. Emma stood in the wrecked bedroom, trying to listen beyond the blood pounding in her ears. There was a sound. Faint. Rhythmic. Not outside. Inside the wall? No. She turned toward the old window unit air conditioner shoved beneath the far window, unplugged for winter. Something ticked inside it. She walked over slowly. Emma? Ray said. She knelt and pulled at the front vent cover. Dust puffed into the air. Taped to the inner metal housing was a spiral-bound ledger with a yellow cover. For a second, nobody moved. Then Ray let out a disbelieving breath that was almost a laugh. I forgot I moved it again. He peeled it free and held it like something alive. Keen closed his eyes once in visible relief. You forgot. Ray glared at him. I had a reason. I'm sure. Emma held out her hand. Ray hesitated, then gave her the ledger first. The cover was cheap office supply cardboard, edges worn and darkened with use. She opened it. Page after page of Daniel's handwriting. Dates, truck numbers, site notations, loads listed as clean fill, demolition mix, mill spoil, west cut, creek berm, cash amounts, initials beside some entries. W, H, M, H, R, K. Emma went cold when she saw those last initials. Keen saw them too over her shoulder and stiffened. Let me see. She handed it to him. He flipped through faster, face tightening. These aren't my initials, Ray said. You expect us to take that on faith? Keen jabbed a finger at one entry. This line says permit discussed at Rotary lunch. I was at a funeral that day. Ask anybody. He turned another page. And this one has RK collecting site photos. That could be Ronnie Kells from Code Enforcement. He looked up. Daniel wrote shorthand. We don't know what half of this means yet. Emma watched him carefully. He wasn't performing outrage. He was working. Parsing. There, Jonah said. He pointed to an entry 3 weeks earlier. Tyler copies annex file. D warned. D warned? Emma whispered. Ray said. Daniel. Keen read another line below it. M says keep boy scared, not hurt. The room went completely still. Emma heard the hound barking again somewhere outside. Absurdly ordinary. Keen turned the page. 2 lines later. Wade hot-headed. Told M he can handle road meat. Emma closed her eyes. Not because it made things clear, because it made them sickeningly clear in the worst possible way. Tyler had not stumbled onto a private mistake. He had become a problem in a system of men managing each other's weakness, and her father had written it down instead of blowing it up. Why keep this? Jonah asked quietly. Ray answered before Keen could. Because your father wanted insurance, and because some coward part of him probably believed he could fix it later. Emma felt anger surge hot enough to steady her. He let a kid become leverage. Nobody argued. Keen flipped toward the back, where the handwriting grew sloppier, as if written under strain. The final pages were mostly dates and load counts until the last completed entry. Yesterday afternoon. T says meeting tonight. Bring phone. End this. Under that, in darker pen pressed so hard it nearly tore the page. If anything happens, house note with First Meridian via Holt Shell. Carla never knew. Emma stared at her mother's name and felt something inside her split cleanly into before and after. Keen shut the ledger carefully. This is enough to move, he said. Ray gave a bitter laugh. Move where? Into whose hands? Keen thought for one beat. State investigators, Jonah said. Before Holt gets a heads up? I'm done trying to keep this local, Keen said. That window closed when Collins's cruiser went off the road. He pulled out his phone, then stopped. No, not over county lines. He looked at Emma. There's a district attorney contact in Macon I trust. Former assistant AG. She owes me nothing, which helps. Ray folded his arms. And while we wait for your trusted outsider, we keep the ledger on our person, and nobody separates. Emma almost laughed at the absurdity, but then headlights washed briefly across the front yard. All 4 of them turned. A pickup rolled slowly past the gate without stopping. Old Ford, dark green, driver hidden by glare. It kept going. Keen moved to the window. Could be nothing, Ray said. Could be Wade, Emma said. We need my mom. The sentence came out before she had fully thought it, but once said it became the only priority that mattered. Holt had the house note. Daniel had written, Carla never knew. If Holt realized the ledger existed, Carla was no longer just collateral in theory. She was exposed. Keen nodded immediately. Call her. Emma dialed with shaking hands. Carla answered on the third ring. Emma? Her voice sounded flat and tired and trying hard not to be either. Mom, where are you? At home. Emma shut her eyes. Leave. Right now. Go to Aunt Becca's or the church or anywhere with people. What are you talking about? Just go. Carla's silence carried too much. Then she said, very quietly, There's a man sitting in a black SUV across the street. Emma's blood went cold. Keene was beside her in an instant, hand out for the phone. Carla, it's Robert Keene. Lock your doors and go out the back if you can. We are on our way. He listened, face hardening. No. Do not confront him. Carla? A beat. Carla? He lowered the phone. She hung up. Ray was already moving. The rush that followed blurred into motion and noise. Front door. Truck doors slamming. Keene calling dispatch, and then cutting himself off mid-sentence as if deciding not to trust the channel. Emma climbed into the back seat with the ledger clutched to her chest, while Ray drove too fast down the dirt lane, and Jonah kept watching the rearview mirror. Every curve of the road felt too slow. Emma stared out at the trees, flickering past, and saw every version of home at once. Christmas lights on the porch gutter, her father asleep in the recliner, her mother balancing the checkbook, all of it now contaminated by men sitting quietly in parked SUVs. She'll be okay, Ray said. But it was the kind of lie adults say when they have nothing else to throw at fear. Keene's cruiser stayed tight behind them all the way into town. When they turned onto Emma's street, the black SUV was still there, parked half a block down from the house like it belonged to someone patient. The Mercer front door stood open. Emma did not wait for the truck to stop fully. She jumped out and ran. Keene shouted after her. Ray cursed. The front room was empty, kitchen empty, hallway empty. Mom! She screamed. No answer. Then a sound came from the garage. A scuffle. Something falling. Emma sprinted toward it just as Ray came in behind her. He shoved past and hit the garage door hard enough to crack it wider against a cooler. Inside, Carla Mercer stood backed against the workbench, breathing ragged, one hand bleeding from the knuckles, where she had apparently hit someone with a wrench. On the floor at her feet was Wade Holt, younger than Emma remembered. Broad, thick-necked, his expensive jacket half unzipped and his expression split between fury and surprise. Keene arrived a second later with his gun drawn. Don't move. Wade froze, then lifted his hands with calculated calm. Sheriff, thank God. This woman's gone crazy, Carla said. He came through my side gate. Her voice shook, but her eyes did not. He asked where the books were, Wade said. I was checking on her because of Daniel. Keene did not lower the gun. Face down. Wade smiled a little. You sure you want to do that? Keene's voice turned to iron. Face down. For the first time, Wade Holt looked unsure. He obeyed slowly. Keene cuffed him while Ray stood over them, fists opening and closing, and Emma went to her mother. Carla grabbed her forearm with bloody fingers hard enough to hurt. What did your father do? She whispered. Emma could not answer that in one sentence, maybe in one lifetime. So, she held her mother instead while Keene hauled Wade to his feet and read him his rights in a garage that smelled like cut grass, oil, and fear. Outside, neighbors had begun to gather in doorways, drawn by the noise like people always were in Mercer County. And Emma understood with sudden, exhausted clarity that the final arc had already begun. Not with justice, not with revelation, but with the moment private damage became public enough that nobody could fold it back into silence again. The first patrol car arrived 3 minutes later, then another, and with them came the irreversible machinery of exposure. Porch lights clicked on all down the block. Phones rose in neighbors' hands like a second row of street lamps. Somebody whispered, "That's Holt's nephew." And somebody else answered, "In the Mercer garage?" As if saying it aloud could finally make sense of everything the town had only suspected. Keene moved fast before the crowd could turn the scene into theater. He shoved Wade into the back of the cruiser, ordered the responding deputies off the radio except for essential traffic, and told one of them to call state investigators directly from his personal phone, not the county dispatch line. Emma watched all of it while holding her mother upright at the kitchen sink, running cold water over Carla's swollen hand. Carla was shivering now that the immediate danger had passed. Shock was setting in around the edges. "He asked for the books?" Emma said softly. Carla nodded once, staring at the blood-thinning pink beneath the tap. He walked around back like he belonged here, knocked on the screen door first, smiling. Her mouth twisted. When I didn't answer, he came into the garage because I'd left the side lock open. Emma handed her a dish towel. Then what? Carla wrapped the towel around her hand with stiff fingers. He said Mason was trying to help clean up a misunderstanding before it became uglier for our family. He said if Daniel had given anything to anyone, I needed to be smart enough to hand it over. I told him to get off my property. She laughed once, brittle and unbelieving. He actually looked offended. Ray paced near the kitchen table, adrenaline still pumping through him so visibly Emma thought he might shake apart. You should have called the second you saw the SUV. Carla turned on him with more heat than Emma had heard from her all day. And what exactly would that have changed? You all have been keeping pieces of this from me for months. Ray stopped. The anger left his face and something worse took its place. Guilt fit him badly, but honestly, Carla, no. She pressed the towel harder against her hand. Do not Carla me right now. My husband borrowed against our house. My daughter is out chasing dead boys' secrets at the marina. Men are breaking into homes for ledgers I didn't know existed, and every single one of you decided I was the person least fit to hear the truth. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because she had. Maybe not for months, but for hours. And in a day like this, hours counted. Keene came back in from the garage and shut the kitchen door behind him, giving them a thin slice of privacy while the deputies secured the scene outside. State's sending 2 investigators and an environmental crimes liaison, he said. They'll want the ledger. Your statements. Everything. Carla looked at him with a cold steadiness Emma had not seen since before the marriage started bending under hidden weight. And what do you want, Robert? Keene stood very still. I want one clean handoff before this county tears itself apart trying to save itself. You're late, she said. He accepted that without defense. Yeah. The words sat in the room like a bruise. Jonah had stayed near the front window, half in shadow, as if he still wasn't sure he belonged inside this family disaster, even after spending the day dragged through it. He looked back toward the street. News van just pulled up. Ray swore. Keene rubbed at his face. Of course it did. Emma felt exhaustion sweep over her so suddenly it almost folded her knees. The day had been nothing but movement, discovery, threat, reaction. Every time she thought she had reached the center of it, another layer opened under her feet. But now, for the first time, there was shape. Evidence. A witness in cuffs. A ledger with dates. A sheriff who had finally stopped pretending local handling could contain local corruption. Shape was not peace. It was just harder for lies to live in. I want to see Dad, she said. Ray looked at her sharply. Tonight? Before the story gets retold by 20 people who weren't there. Carla stared down at the towel around her hand. I'm going too. Keene shook his head. Not together. Not with the house like this and media outside. Carla, you need urgent care for that hand, and then somewhere else to sleep tonight. I'm not leaving my house. Your house is already public property in the town's mind, Ray said, too blunt, then softened when he saw her face. Just for one night. Carla's shoulders sagged. She looked older than she had that morning. Not by years. By truths. Becca's, she said finally. I'll go to Becca's. Keene nodded. Good, Emma said. And then I'm going to the jail. I'll take you, Keene said. Ray immediately objected. The hell you will. Keene met his eyes. You want to explain to state investigators why I let Daniel Mercer's daughter roam around with primary evidence still moving? Ray looked at the ledger on the table and said nothing. Carla sat down slowly. Take her, she said. Emma turned. Mom. Carla did not look up. Take her, because if she doesn't hear it from him tonight, she'll invent 10 versions and believe the worst one first. Emma wanted to deny that. She couldn't. The ride to the county jail happened after they got Carla into Ray's truck and sent Jonah with them toward Aunt Becca's house. After Keene signed the ledger into temporary personal custody with a body cam recording running, after a state investigator named Marisol Vega called to say she was 90 minutes out and wanted nobody speaking to press. By then, the town had crossed fully into spectacle. The square was lit up with satellite trucks and camera crews in fleece jackets talking into microphones about alleged corruption and a local businessman's arrest. Emma kept her face turned toward the window as Keene drove. Neon signs from the closed pharmacy and pawn shop slid across the cruiser glass in bands of blue and red. Did you know Wade would go after the house? She asked at last. Keene kept both hands on the wheel. I knew once Holt realized Daniel had kept records, he'd try to recover them fast. I didn't know if he'd send Wade or a lawyer first. That's some comfort. Didn't mean it as comfort. They passed the church where Emma had sung in youth choir until she was 16 and cynical enough to stop pretending. Faith came easier in groups. Tonight, the fellowship hall lights were on. No doubt people were inside already, discussing her family in tones they would call prayerful. Were you in it? She asked. Keene did not pretend not to understand. No. You protected it. A longer silence this time. I protected the county from what I thought was a manageable mess, he said finally. That's the kind answer. The uglier one is, I told myself if I kept pressure on Holt quietly, I could limit the damage without blowing open half the people this town depends on for payroll and roads and campaign money. Men who tell themselves that enough times start sounding reasonable even when they're just scared. Emma looked at him. The dashboard light carved hollows under his eyes. Scared of what? Of what happens after. He gave a short, tired breath. People love the idea of truth, until truth threatens mortgages and jobs, and the only clinic for 30 miles. Then they start negotiating with it. That sounded too much like her father. Like Ray. Like maybe every adult in Mercer County in some form. She hated how familiar it felt. Tyler didn't negotiate, she said. No, Keene said quietly. He didn't. The jail sat behind the courthouse annex, low and plain and ugly in a way that suggested permanence without dignity. Keene got Emma through the back entrance to avoid the cameras. The fluorescent lights inside were harsh enough to make everyone look more guilty or more tired than they were. Maybe both. Daniel Mercer was in interview room 2 when Emma saw him again. No cuffs now, just a gray county blanket folded over the back of the chair and a paper cup of untouched water in front of him. He looked smaller than she had ever seen him, not because jail had already changed him, but because the scaffolding of his ordinary life had fallen away and left him visible. His eyes found Emma the second she entered. For one terrible second, his face lit with relief. Then he saw what was in hers and the relief died. Keene closed the door and stayed inside, taking the corner chair without comment. Daniel looked from him to Emma and back again. Your mom okay? He asked. Emma almost laughed. It came out as a cracked breath instead. Wade Holt broke into our garage looking for your insurance policy. Daniel shut his eyes. The shame on his face was immediate and raw enough to make her angrier, not softer. Emma. No, don't do that voice. She stayed standing. You don't get to start with my name like this is one of those talks where you explain a mistake and I leave knowing you meant well. Daniel looked down at the table. You shouldn't be here. Where else would I be? His fingers tightened around the paper cup until it bent inward. At home. We don't have that tonight. That hit. She saw it land. Daniel nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and something in him seemed to fold further inward. Robert tell you any of it? He asked. Enough to know Tyler called you. Enough to know you brought a gun to meet a teenager. Enough to know you wrote things down while they got worse. Daniel's throat worked. I never thought. Don't. Her voice sharpened. Don't say that sentence to me. Everybody in this county never thought until a kid was bleeding out on a road. Keene stayed silent, letting it happen. Daniel looked older by the second. You want me to tell it straight? He said. Emma crossed her arms to keep her hands from shaking. Try. Daniel breathed in deeply and began. And for once, he did not seem to be arranging his words for comfort. He talked about the loan first, because apparently that was where all roads now led. Holt had floated him money when a municipal contract payment stalled and payroll was due. Then another short note when equipment repairs hit at the same time as medical bills from Carla's surgery last spring. Daniel had told himself each time that he was protecting the family from temporary embarrassment, not inviting disaster. Then, Holt had folded the personal loans into leverage. A grading contract here, a route adjustment there. Nothing that looked impossible on paper, Daniel said, staring at the tabletop. Just enough off to make me uneasy. When Daniel pushed back on night hauling, Holt had shown him the first Meridian note with Carla's forged acknowledgement page clipped behind it. Forged? Emma looked at Keene, who had gone very still. Daniel nodded. He said if I made noise, the bank would call the house, and good luck explaining to my wife why she'd apparently signed. I should have gone to a lawyer then. I know that. I know it. His voice broke on the second no. Emma felt her stomach twist. Did you forge her name? Daniel looked up at her so fast the chair squeaked. No. Then, quieter. I lied about everything else around it, but not that. Mason handled the paperwork through some shell company. He put signature pages in front of me and said they were copies. I didn't know until later. Emma wanted to believe that. Wanted was not enough. So you kept going. Daniel nodded. Because every week I thought I could buy time. Because every week I thought one more compromise would keep the bigger collapse off the porch. He laughed once, hollow and disgusted with himself. Men tell themselves they're holding a line when really they're just moving it. Keene glanced at him briefly, the look of one guilty man recognizing language he had used in his own head. Emma heard it too. Tyler, she said. Daniel flinched before she even finished the name. He came to the office 2 weeks ago, Daniel said. Walked right in carrying those annex copies like he was serving a warrant. He was mad, but he was scared too. Said if I didn't help him prove the roots were fake and the fill was dirty, He'd go to the paper and state environmental. I told him to do it. I swear to God, Emma. I told him to go public and get far away from me. That's not what the ledger says. Daniel swallowed. The ledger says what I was too scared to say out loud. I warned Holt Tyler had copies because I thought if Holt knew the boy had backups, he'd stop trying to pressure me and start protecting himself. He shut his eyes. I told myself warning Holt would keep Tyler from becoming a target because smart men don't go after kids when there's paperwork. Turns out scared men aren't smart. Emma felt fury and grief rise together so violently she had to grip the back of the empty chair beside her. You fed him to them. I know. The words came out barely audible. I know. Silence filled the room. Harsh, fluorescent, unforgiving. Daniel lifted a hand to his face and held it there for a second before continuing. Tyler had called last night because he said he had video, ledger photos, and a second phone with messages that tied Wade to the road meeting. He wanted Daniel to help him get it out safely. He said he didn't trust the sheriff's office, Daniel said, glancing once at Keene. He said if I had any decency left, I'd bring proof of the banknote and testify. Did you? Emma asked. Daniel laughed, choked on it, and looked at the table again. I brought the gun and a copy of nothing. That's what I did. The shame in the sentence was so naked she almost looked away. Almost. Because you thought it was a trap, she said. Because I thought everything was a trap by then. He nodded. Tyler got angry when he realized I came empty-handed. He called me a coward, said I cared more about my house than his life. Daniel's eyes filled, but he did not look away from her. He was right. Emma felt tears hit before she realized they had started. She wiped them off angrily. Then Wade showed up. Daniel's jaw tightened. I heard the truck first. Tyler heard it too, he said. You told them. And took off toward his own truck. I went after him because I knew Wade would panic if Tyler ran with that phone. I had the gun in my hand because I'd taken it from the seat. Tyler slipped. I grabbed his hoodie. He swung at me. Somebody shouted from the dark. I turned. The gun went off. He stopped, breath shaking. When I looked back at Tyler, I knew it didn't matter whether it was an accident. I'd built the road to it. Emma stared at him. There it was. Not redemption. Not absolution. Just the true shape of responsibility, uglier than intent, and harder to forgive. Keene spoke for the first time in several minutes. Did Wade touch the body? Daniel nodded. Kicked the phone away. Looked at me like I was the stupidest man alive. Said, now you understand. Then he took something from the ground. Maybe the phone, maybe the folder. I don't know. He told me if I wanted Carla to keep the house, I'd say Tyler came at me. Emma felt sick. And you almost did. Daniel's mouth trembled. I did. Until I heard you'd gone to the Bennetts. Heard Ray had moved the ledger. Heard Wade got picked up in your garage. He looked at her directly then. I don't have any lies left that help. For a long moment Emma could not speak. She remembered all the ordinary versions of him at once, layered cruelly over the man in front of her, fixing a chain on her bike, falling asleep in front of baseball games, teaching her how to back a trailer down a ramp without jackknifing. She wanted to know exactly when that man had turned into this one. The harder truth was that maybe he had always been both, and she had only now been forced to watch one side consume the other. Mom didn't know about the house, she said. Daniel closed his eyes. I know. Wade came for her today because of what you kept. I know. Tyler's dead because you thought fear could be managed. This time, Daniel did not say, I know. He simply bowed his head. That somehow hurt more. Emma took a slow breath and felt something settle inside her. Not peace, not forgiveness, but a grim clarity. Then you tell all of it, she said. State investigators, bank fraud, dumping, Holt, Wade, every county office you dirtied yourself through. You do not start protecting one more person because you're afraid of what it does to us. Daniel looked up. Emma. No. Her voice steadied as she spoke. You don't get to call what you did protection anymore. Keene nodded once from the corner. She's right. Daniel looked between them and seemed to understand that the decision was no longer his alone. Something in him gave way then. Not dramatically. Just a final surrender of whatever pride had kept him half upright. All right, he said. All of it. The state investigators arrived 40 minutes later, and with them, the story shifted again from local panic to formal consequence. Marisol Vega turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in a dark blazer, who looked more like a defense attorney in a television show than a field investigator in rural Georgia, but within 60 seconds of sitting across from Daniel Mercer, she had the room under control. Keene handed over the ledger, the chain of custody recordings, the notes about Collins's crash, and the circumstances of Wade's arrest. Vega listened to Daniel's initial statement without interrupting, except once to ask for exact times. Emma stayed only long enough to hear her father repeat, in a clearer voice than he had used with her. No. Tyler Bennett did not threaten me with a weapon. He threatened me with the truth. After that, she could not stay inside that fluorescent room another second. She stepped into the hallway and found Keen waiting near the vending machines, hat back on, shoulders slumped for the first time all day. "You did the right thing," he said. Emma stared at the tile floor. "Feels late for that." "Usually is." He sounded like a man speaking from experience, not cliché. She leaned against the cinder block wall. "What happens now?" "Now." Keen gave a tired exhale. "Now the state tears through permits, banknotes, emails, hall records. Holt will lawyer up before dawn. Wade'll try to walk back every word he said and pretend he was checking on Carla out of Christian concern. Your father will either keep cooperating or he'll fold when the charges get real." He looked at her. "And the county will spend the next year deciding whether it hates me for not stopping this sooner or for not burying it better." Emma almost smiled, but there was nothing in her with enough lightness for it. Which one deserves more? He considered that. Probably both. Outside, dawn was still hours away, but the sense of one day bleeding into the next had already vanished. This felt like aftermath, even with so much still unresolved. Maybe aftermath always arrived before resolution. Maybe that was why people confused the two. Ray came in not long after, carrying coffees and Carla's car keys. "Your mom's asleep at Becca's," he said. "Doctor says the hand's bruised. No break." Emma nodded, relief passing through her too quietly to show. Ray hesitated, then handed her a paper cup. "You okay?" It was the wrong question. She let him ask it anyway. "No," she said. "Good," he answered, surprising her. "Means you're not lying to yourself yet." She took the coffee. It tasted burnt and perfect. They sat in silence for a while, the three of them in a hallway that smelled like bleach and stale snacks, listening to muffled voices from interview rooms and the hum of old fluorescent fixtures. At some point, Jonah texted that Frank Bennett had agreed to meet with state investigators in the morning, and that Linda had asked only one question when she heard Wade had been arrested. Was Daniel finally telling the truth? Emma stared at that text until the letters blurred. Finally, she wrote back, "He is now." It was not enough. It was what existed. By sunrise, the cameras had moved from the square to the courthouse steps. Mason Holt was taken into custody just after 7, on charges tied first to fraud and obstruction, with the environmental pieces still unfolding. The footage played on every local channel by 8:30. Men who had shaken his hand at rib cook-offs and ribbon cuttings suddenly spoke about him with distance. Like corruption had a smell they would have noticed sooner if they'd stood closer. Wade was transferred to state holding before lunch, after trying and failing to turn his garage arrest into a trespass misunderstanding. Deputy Lena Collins, concussed but awake, identified Holt's SUV from the vehicle that had run her off the road, and confirmed she had been carrying the recovered documents when it happened. By noon, the county commission office had locked its doors and posted a handwritten sign about unforeseen circumstances. Mercer County, for one hot, punishing day, became the place people from neighboring towns discussed, with a mix of pity and excitement, at gas pumps and barber shops. But Tyler Bennett was still dead. Nothing in the arrests changed that. Nothing in Daniel's cooperation changed the image of Linda Bennett standing on her porch with grief burning through her face. Nothing changed the fact that Carla would have to walk back into her own house and learn every room again with the knowledge of what had nearly been taken under its roof. That evening, after statements and logistics and too many cups of coffee, Emma stood alone in the backyard at Aunt Becca's while the last light went out of the sky. The air smelled like cut grass and rain still far off. She could hear her mother inside talking softly with Becca in the kitchen, their voices low and tired, making practical lists, because practical lists were how women like them survived the first wave of disaster. Ray was on the phone with a lawyer. Jonah had gone home hours earlier. Keen was somewhere writing reports that would either save part of his soul or end what was left of his career. And Daniel Mercer sat in a cell telling the truth in installments, which was maybe the most honest thing he had left to offer. Emma looked toward the dark line of trees beyond the yard and thought about Tyler on the road, asking why. She understood now that the question had never belonged to one moment. It belonged to all of them. Why did one compromise become 10? Why did fear dress itself up as responsibility? Why did whole towns learn to live beside rot if the payroll cleared and the creek still looked clean from a distance? Those questions would outlast the headlines. They would outlast the trials. Maybe they would outlast Mercer County itself. Her mother stepped onto the back porch then, hand bandaged, face drawn, and somehow more open than Emma had seen in years. For a second, they simply looked at each other. Then Carla came down the steps and stood beside her in the cooling dark. "I talked to the bank," she said. Emma turned. Tonight? Carla nodded. First Meridian froze the note pending the fraud investigation. A pause. So we keep the house for now. Emma let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Carla looked out across the yard. That doesn't feel like winning. It isn't. No. Carla folded her good arm across her middle. But it's something we don't have to lose tonight. They stood there another moment. Then Carla said, Your father asked me not to come see him until after he gives the full statement. Emma looked at her mother's profile in the dim porch light. Are you going to? Carla took time with that. I don't know yet. Honesty again. Hard, undressed, unsatisfying honesty. It seemed to be all anybody had left now. Emma nodded. That's fair. Carla glanced at her. You? Emma thought of the interview room, the bent paper cup, the moment Daniel stopped protecting the lie and finally faced the shape of what he had done. She thought of the little girl memories that would not disappear just because they hurt to hold beside the new ones. I already did, she said. And? Emma looked back into the dark yard. Somewhere beyond it, beyond the neighborhood and the courthouse and the county roads and the ridge where the trucks had moved at night, lay Tyler Bennett's empty room and Frank Bennett's silence, and a creek that might carry poison farther than anyone had admitted. And I don't think truth makes people smaller, she said quietly. I think it just takes away the room they used to hide in. Carla absorbed that without answering. After a while, she reached over and took Emma's hand with her uninjured one. It was a simple gesture, almost childlike. Emma held on. Inside the house, plates clinked softly, as Becca set the table for food nobody was really hungry for. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A train moved far off in the dark, carrying its hollow sound over the county like a warning or a prayer. Mercer County would not wait clean tomorrow. Men would spin, lawyers would narrow, neighbors would sort themselves into camps of outrage, denial, and opportunism. The Bennetts would grieve in a world that suddenly cared about their son's courage because it had failed to protect it when he was alive. Daniel Mercer would face courtrooms and statements and years shaped by a single night he had spent months building with cowardice. And Emma, standing beside her mother in the bruised quiet after spectacle, understood that the ending people wanted was impossible. There would be no neat repair, no speech that redeemed a father or restored a boy, or washed a creek clear by wanting it so. There would only be consequence, endured one day at a time, and the hard decision not to look away from what had been done in their name. In that sense, the night had given them the only honest inheritance it could. Not peace, responsibility. And when Carla's grip on her hand tightened slightly, Emma tightened back, facing the dark with her because there was nothing else left that counted as real.